on where you want to do.
The wingers. I feel say our wingers.
No. Tell me so. Here's what I'm saying.
Martinelli cannot start for that team anymore. Martinelli not fit play pass as he play. He cannot go beyond this ceiling. He don't reach out.
You'll be shocked that he will go to another club and
it happens now. This Salah go from Chelsea to Roma and Liverpool and became a star. So, De Bruyne from Chelsea.
I feel like
all that shit I do.
This league here,
useless.
This league,
he rep to what?
Ateta should have won this league 2-3 years ago.
See, you have to understand one thing, Ralphie.
It's not about the depth of boys there.
City and Pep spend money. If Ateta had that kind of pocket, we don't win the league since.
We said the same thing.
No, but see now, if Pep get issues, Pep spent how much to buy goalkeeper. He buy this one, not work. He sell them immediately. Like, sell them. I think they don't get that kind. They don't get that enough fix.
But I feel that he would have won the league like 2-3 years ago.
You not get players because you see, I've just told you now that Arsenal have played the most football in England. You can see Saka has been tired since December
because he had the
we're going now. Absolutely, it should. Happy Easter and welcome to Wealth Management and You, the Easter edition here on Classic FM 97.3. My name is Chico, and joining me this Easter edition of the show, Raphael Emenyon. Good evening, Raphael.
Good evening, Chico. Happy Easter. Happy Easter, Lagos.
Happy Easter. Well,
hope you had a good holiday.
I'm moving house, and it's traumatic.
I can imagine.
Honestly, really,
I can imagine.
You know, it's been tough.
I can imagine. But
even I'm surprised that I'm here. You know, but happy Easter to you who've tuned in. Thank you for doing so. Our topic today, well, why didn't I achieve my financial goals in Q1 as the first quarter? Between January and the end of March or the beginning of April. Why? We're going to have a look at that, okay? And looking back at that should really then mean that Q2, your performance will be better.
Absolutely, yes? absolutely. And we'll encourage you to also share with us why you think that didn't happen in terms of achieving your financial goals in first quarter, if you fall in that bucket as well. Share with us. Chico would read out the WhatsApp number in a second.
That's right. If there's any reason you think is why you didn't hit your targets, your financial goals in Q1, please share it with us and the financial expert in the studio will be able to advise you. That way, quarter 2 and 3 and 4, your performance will be much improved.
Absolutely.
So here's how to reach us. 0704 1001 973. That number again for your WhatsApp messages is 0704 1001 973. Right. I know it pretty much speaks for itself, but we like to explain things in proper detail and on a granular level to avoid any misunderstanding. Explain what financial goals actually are, and who sets them. Are they set for us? Do we set them for ourselves? You know, what are financial goals?
Yeah, it's a good way to start the conversation. So, recall we had financial planning some weeks ago.
That's right.
So just as the name implies, financial goals. I mean, these are goals that you intend to achieve. You set it by yourself.
Yes.
But anyway, and you're going to achieve them, or you're meant to achieve them with your finances. So just as the name implies, financial goals. They're goals that you set, and they're goals that you want to achieve with your finances. I don't even think there's any goal that you can achieve without finances. You know, I don't think there's any, but if there's anyone, I mean, listeners can let us know. But I think all goals essentially, you have to achieve them with your finances. these are goals that you don't have to regret. Setting financial goals, adopting the financial planning philosophy, you don't have to regret your past. Financial planning is about convenient way of achieving your financial targets, right? So it's not about regretting your past, but it's about looking at where you are today and where you want to be, over a period, maybe 5 years, maybe 10 years, maybe 2 years from now. So, and the actions you need to take in between to achieve
that. Yeah, yes. So, but give us an example, or give me an example. So for instance, you paying your rent.
Yeah, it's a
Can
financial
that
goal.
be a financial goal?
Absolutely, it's a financial goal. Yes, but recall that we also, when we defined it some weeks ago, we also mentioned that you need to align it with a SMART acronym. It's got to be specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and time bound. So saying I want to pay my rent, or writing that down as a goal
in itself is vague.
Is like a wishful list.
Yes.
Right. So you have to put a timeline to it, so you know what you're working towards. And then if it's in 6 months that you have to make this payment, then it becomes measurable, like every month.
Yes.
So if
how much you need to
and how much
set
you've been able
aside,
to set aside every month. So that then takes you closer to that goal.
Okay, so realistic is considering what you earn already.
Yeah.
Or does this involve seeking alternative streams of income?
Both.
Okay.
It could be both, and ultimately it could also mean relevant. He has to be relevant to the big picture of that journey, that you're trying to attain as well. And when I say big picture, an example of that is maybe you're also eyeing a very senior role in the office, and you need to get like a certification, to be able to qualify for that role. So the steps that you're beginning to put in place to achieve that certification feeds into that bigger picture of where you're going to at the end of the day. So you need to be clear. You need to have clarity. You need to have direction, because that's also what builds confidence. You can't just have clarity without direction. And you need to have clarity in the sense that I can tell you today that I want to achieve this goal, and then because Chico says he wants to achieve another goal, then I'm immediately jumping
or influenced by what Chico has said, and you go in Chico's direction.
So you need to be clear, because your financial goals are for you, right? And we're all unique in our different ways. Our journeys are different. So you need to be clear. You also need to align your behavior to that goal that you set, because that might also be a reason why you didn't achieve your goal in Q1. So you also need to align your behavior to that goal as well.
Okay.
So
I see a number of different reasons here that people are giving for not meeting their financial goals in Q1. But there are some that are general, right? That can prevent you from reaching your financial goals.
Yeah, that's true.
And you don't have any control over these things. Something like inflation, for instance, is one of these factors. So I'd like you to talk to us about inflation as a critical factor this first quarter, for instance.
And that's a very, very important.
We all keep hearing that inflation is coming down, but the price of cement is still the price of cement. The price of a loaf of bread is still the price of a loaf of bread.
Yeah.
The price of petrol is still the price of petrol, diesel, whatever. So
that's not even stable. That's not even stable. That's the root cause of all the problems. That's what is affecting the price of all goods and services, like petrol that you mentioned.
Yes.
So yes, statistically, the numbers are coming down. But with the US, Iran, Israel war, is expected that at the end of March the number should go back up a little bit. But January, February, the numbers looked like they were coming down. But this war started late February into March, and that affected the prices as well. We saw what happened in the month of March. So yes, inflation was a critical factor in Q1 that could have distorted people's plans in terms of their savings and their goals. So if you look at it, and that's where the budgeting tool kicks in again. You know,
Yes.
we've talked about budgeting too. We've talked about budget. Always have a budget while you're trying to achieve your goals. Now, what that means is that because prices of things are not stable, because Nigeria is an uncertain country, right?
Yes.
You need to then review your budget either weekly or monthly, depending on when you spend the money, right? Because you know clearly that these things are not stable. So if you choose to work with a rigid budget in Nigeria, there's a possibility that you won't get the reward. So you have to be flexible with your budget, and you have to review it like weekly or monthly.
How do you?
So if you set numbers, and when you're reviewing it, now there should be some plus or minus, you know, in terms of what you're trying to do. If you set a number for groceries, for instance, in week 1, by the beginning of week 2, you need to review those numbers to make provision for expected movement in prices. Because if you choose to work with a rigid budget, you might go back to the grocery store and not find them at the same price that you bought last week, which is what is happening. So you have to keep reviewing it. You know, you have to add some plus or minus, so that you can work with a decent number, so that you don't go into the grocery store and you're shocked, you know, at what comes at you. And that's because Nigeria's system is the economy as it stands, you know, is not stable. Things are very uncertain. So you have to work with that kind of budget. You need to track your expenses at the same time, but you need to ensure that, you know, as you're making provision for your fixed purchases, you need to add some plus or minus weekly, you know. So you probably might need to cut down on your wants, which are not necessary, but you just want to have them, you know, for the sake of having them. You need to cut down on those so that you're able to provide for the fixed expenses that you have. And you need to track your expenses. You need to ensure that you're cutting off things that are not necessary because of the way things are. Now, if you look at investment options that could help with inflation, like I said, statistically, inflation is around the 15% levels. It's possible that would go up with what has happened in March. But if you look at money market fund, since the beginning of the year, it's at an average effective yield of about 17%. The stock market, on the other hand, the index is roughly about 26%, which means there's stocks that could have given you that sort of levels, right, in the first quarter of the year. But what I would also like to point out is that savings alone cannot make you wealthy, you know. So you also need to begin to think of how you want to, and when I say savings alone, when you're exposed to asset classes that the returns you're going to get are predetermined, you know, because inflation is not something that you can determine, but you're getting returns that are predetermined, like your treasury bills, like your savings accounts, like your money market fund, like your fixed deposits in the bank. You know, they're predetermined. Those are savings, right? You might need to take a little bit of exposure to increased risk, you know, to increase your risk a little bit and invest in things like stock, things like real estate, things like building your own business. We've always talked about side hustles, right? Try to get a side hustle. Try to invest in other people's business, you know, just think of doing other things, because one source of income, savings, cannot get you wealthy. There's a saying that if you depend on just a source of income, which is like salary, then your financial freedom will be dependent on somebody else, you know. So you need to try and build other sources of income, you know, in line with what you currently earn.
Wow. It's daunting, but it's doable. Yes,
absolutely. It is you just need to track your expenses. You know, you need to track your expenses as much as possible.
Okay. You have mentioned a few savings that have returns that are above inflation, so we're not going to go back and look at that. But these unplanned, how does one address unplanned emergencies? I mean, these things continue to happen. You know,
yeah.
There's that saying, man proposes God disposes or something like that.
Yeah.
Or the one they say the best laid plans. You know, so we can make all these plans, but especially in the sort of environment that we operate in, which I will make bold to say is hostile when it comes to these kind of things.
Yeah. So while you were speaking, I was thinking of the reality, you know, in Q1 to two people that I know, you know, and it's because of the current reality in our economy, right? These are organizations that I thought that, you know, for them to move forward, they have to downsize. And this affected two people that I know, you know, in Q1. Now, these are guys that I mean, the week before, they didn't see it coming.
Yes.
And it happened the following week, and it was sudden, you know. So you can imagine, and we talked about it a couple of weeks ago as well, about setting up emergency fund.
Yes.
And this is critical, you know, we need to mention this again, that this is very important, you know, for you to achieve your goal, because what it then does to you if those sort of things happen suddenly is that you begin to dip your hands into your plan for other goals, you know, because you don't have something to take care of those emergencies when they'll call, you know. And very quickly, the tips for you to set up an emergency fund is define what that emergency is, because everything can be emergency. They're meant to be rare occurrences. And I told you again about the guy that said R. Kelly coming to town was
an emergency
for him, you know, because it's not going to happen next day. It's a rare occurrence in his own view, you know. So you have to define what emergencies are, so that you don't take everything as emergencies and you don't wound down the fund when you begin to build it. You have to also define the category where you belong, whether you're an individual or you're married with children or you're self-employed. If you're an individual, between 3 to 6 months worth of your living expenses. Living expenses are expenses that you have to make commitments for, you know, every period, you know. So like your transportation, your feeding, whether you like it or not, you have to spend, you know, on those ones. So what are those monthly living expenses, you know, that you have? So for the sake of this conversation, if it's 100,000 naira, your 3 to 6 months living expenses will be 300 to 600,000 naira. You don't have to put a lump sum aside as your emergency fund, but you can save in bits but that's your target, right? If you're married, it's double of that, you know, so it's 6 to 12 months. If you're self-employed, it's 9 to 12 months, right? So you need to ascertain the category where you belong in setting up your emergency fund, because it has to align with your living expenses. Products like money market fund is what is advisable, because again, it's a product that pays you decent income, preserves your capital. You don't require a debit card, so that you don't swipe when you're tempted, right? So you can actually leave the money there to work hard for you, because again, the yields are a lot better than your traditional savings account. So you need to have an emergency fund, and that's the first thing that you need to set up before you even begin to plan for other goals. So if you don't have that, there's a huge possibility that if emergencies happen, it's likely to disrupt, you know, the plans that you've laid out for the quarter.
I think generally speaking, a lot of these will apply where, because many people, I mean, I saw something the other day where it was looking at the minimum wage of 70K a month. That is in many cases, for foreign bag of rice is more expensive,
absolutely,
than the minimum wage, and so a minimum wage can't buy you a bag of foreign rice. It might just about buy a bag of the local rice and stuff. So now that person, priority really for that person is going to probably be feeding, because without food you can't stay alive. So a lot of these things, as we're talking about it, I'd like us to look at it vis-a-vis where these things can work in a lot of cases where someone gets some money, it's unexpected, and then take your time now, make that money work for you, as opposed to just squandering it. You know, perhaps it's a parent who passes and you get a little something. You know, temptation is to largesse. I've been suffering all these years. Suddenly I've got them. Let me, you know. I know a friend who their dad died and had a few properties. After a bit of squabbling, decided they were going to sell it. They sold the property, and his share from there was a very large family. His share of this money came to about between 10 and 11 million, 10 point something million, you know, and a year and a half down the line, he was back to where he was prior. Money like that, already you're in a situation where you've been, money like that, surely, you know, you've got to think about, all right, let me sit down, maybe talk with a financial expert. Because yes, it's not a massive amount of money, but it is still decent. There are people who build.
So what happened to that young man even happens to people that are, you know, earning consistent income.
Yes.
And that's what that's what is called lifestyle inflation. You know,
lifestyle inflation.
Yes.
Okay.
This is a topic on its own that we can discuss for like 2 days.
Yes.
But I'll just give you a bit of, you know, what it means.
Yes.
It means that, and it's something that can easily lead you to what is also called high income poverty trap.
Wow.
You know, because as your income increases, as you get the windfall, you are improving on your lifestyle needlessly, right? So you're staying in Lekki, phase 1, which is just about 10-20 minutes drive to your office. Because your salary has been increased or you got this windfall, you move to Koi. You see, you're driving Honda. There's nothing wrong with it. Same Honda, maybe 2024, 2025. Because you got the windfall or salary increase, you switch to Benz or Beamer so that you can impress people, right?
I've arrived.
You know, that sort of thing. So that's what you see. And then you begin to probably post pictures on social media as well, you know, Pepper Them Gang and all those things. You know? So that's what is called lifestyle inflation. You travel on vacation economy once a year because
all for the gram.
Now is business class, you know, because that has happened. So those sort of, and I'm not saying that when those opportunities come, you know, don't reward yourself for the hard work, you deserve it. But again, you don't get carried away without making plans, you know, for that buffer. So what I would recommend is, in that sort of situation, if you're earning your consistent income and that happens, you can say, okay, split it 50-50. Put 50 into your investment plan and then spend 50 on yourself, rather than squander everything. Nothing is happening in terms of your finances, you know. So it's lifestyle inflation, and it happens, you know, it happens to a lot of people, you know. So it's not necessarily high income that translates to financial independence or financial security. It is, again, what you do with that money that is important.
That's important.
You know, yeah.
Lovely. Okay. Okay. I suppose this is related, because what we're talking about, does it have to do with anything to do with people's background or mindset? And how does legacy come into the picture?
Okay, so when you look at people's background, it's how they understand money while they're growing up. There are two categories. There's a category that sees money as scarcity. There's a category that sees money as abundance, right? Now, the scarcity...
I wonder which one I am.
We'll get to that. The scarcity bit is the guy that always feels that money is a scarce product at every point in time. So an example is somebody that wants to do everything by himself.
Okay.
You know, you want to hand wash your clothes by yourself. You want to iron your clothes by yourself. You want to wash your car by yourself.
As opposed to paying someone to do it. Okay.
So they eventually fall into a time trap. You know, instead of getting people to do it, so you can free up some time for yourself and do some strategic things and make more money. Right?
Maybe that's me, you know. I'm moving house, and guess what? I drove a van. I drove a van.
So the people in that category.
Okay.
Right. And we're going to come to how legacy, because this is it, right?
Yes.
The abundance guys are guys that they see money as it's always going to come, so they're willing to, take chances, they're willing to take the risk, they're willing to free up time for themselves there. But the challenge with those guys is that if they're not careful, you need to be able to balance your assets and your liabilities. At every point in time, your assets are meant to be higher than your liabilities. So the problem with those kind of guys is they might be spending a lot of their money on liabilities and not assets. So they need to balance it. Liabilities are the house you stay in, for instance, if it's yours, I mean, to a layman, liabilities are whatever takes money away from you. Assets is what brings money to you, So for the abundance guys, if they're not careful, they might be spending a lot on liabilities, thinking that, they're spending well. So they need to balance it, While for the scarcity guys, they just tend to end up in a time trap, So that's their own problem, and that's what they need to solve. So on the legacy bit, if you remember the session we had on legacy, we had defined it as generational wealth, that can come in 3 different ways, right? The first is it could be monetary terms. It could be you just teaching values to the younger generation, what you've learned, about values, about how to build wealth.
Yes.
Or it could be you just getting them to learn from you, what you do to be able to build wealth. Learn directly without educating, let them see you do it, and then they can pick from there. So generational wealth, legacy can come from that. Now, if you've set a goal for yourself in Q1, because we had that session in Q1, to transfer generational wealth, or begin to put the tools in place, and you haven't done that in Q1, it then means that perhaps you need to free up time to be able to do that, because it's important, that you do it. So in terms of legacy, in terms of passing on inheritance, you need to then begin to educate those people, your younger generation, make them understand, whether they are from the scarcity background or the abundance background, they need to begin to understand, what they need to do to be able to build wealth, and then how you then need to begin to put the tools in place, for them to earn, or for you to transfer, that wealth to them as well.
Okay, so let's look ahead now as we go into the second quarter. How can one ensure that they achieve their financial goals in the second quarter?
How do you ensure that you achieve your financial goals? I think you need to get an accountability partner. And in getting an accountability partner, you also need to be careful, because if you have big goals you want to achieve, people that don't believe in those sort of big goals might discourage you, and if you're also seeking validation, approval from people, which is also part of what could have slowed a lot of people down.
I'm sorry, I'm taking you back. Accountability partner is kind of reminding me of like Alcoholics Anonymous sort of thing, where you've got where you've got some sort of partner that if you feel like taking a drink, call them, and
it could be that sort of partner as well. But what is important is, it could be that sort of partner.
Okay.
But it's just someone that would always help you, put some checks in place, ask you about those things that you want to do.
Yes.
Remind you of those timelines, But if you're
isn't that wifey?
It could be your spouse. It could be your friend. It could be
or your husband, your wife.
It could be your siblings. It could be anyone. But it's just someone that you're sure that this person can help you, or can put you in check. Just to ensure that you're doing these things that you've highlighted for yourself, and you're
This is about
you're
helping
working
you to
towards.
sort of maintain discipline. Or to
Yes,
stay on
and
track.
consistency. Not perfection. Discipline, yes, but I think consistency is the word.
Okay.
You know, because you need to be consistent, you know, at doing those things, you know, and that's how you can easily arrive at that goal.
Fantastic stuff. This has been Wealth Management and You. It comes your way at 5:30 every Monday on Classic FM 97.3. And this has been the Easter edition of the show. Ralph and I wish you the very best in the second quarter. And we'll talk about whether you let us be your accountability partner. And you can let us know come the end of Q2 how you got on. Final word, Ralph?
Happy Easter once again, Lagos, Nigeria, and we'll be talking about how the Nigerian market has performed in first quarter 2026 when we see you again next week, Monday at 5:30.
Play every song you know. Classic FM.